Alrighty then. Greetings and welcome once again. My name is Sojourner. No, my name is Sojourner, reggae artist. You can tell I'm a little bit sleepy this day, but please excuse me. I'm sure I will wake up promptly as we begin the reading. My name is Imuna Yisrael, aka for Sojourner, for those who know me in the music world. And today is the fourth edition, or the fourth part of us with the LEV project, Lift Every Voice. You usually say and sing, but today is and read. And this is a series of which we'll be reading. Let me turn this down so this thing won't be whistling. This is a series of which we'll be reading different narratives, but in this case, today we are reading from the book 50 Years in Chains, The Life of an American Slave by Charles Ball. And as always, if you desire to read, feel free to let us know ahead of time so that we can arrange, whether you be on the conference call or whether you come on the Google Hangouts to read. So far, we've had great participation, and I thank everyone who has taken the time to read. So I'm going to, last week we did it on Wednesday, where we got about a chapter and a little bit, chapter 5 in, and we had Sister Angel Bull, who sent me over the first portion of it. And so we're going to pick up on the second portion. If you have missed any of what I'm saying, all of the recordings are there, so you can definitely go back and get caught up. We also have the link to this particular narrative, and it's 100% free. So no worries there. If you have the will, then you will be able to do it. So I didn't have any volunteers today, and so I will pick up where we left off here on chapter 5. If you're going offline, it's going to be on page 96. And I'm going to start off at the next morning. Again, we haven't heard from the men yet. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're a man, we would love for you to lift every voice. This definitely is the narrative of a male. This is his experience, and it's also part of the healing process. And so just give me 1 second. I'm not playing any music right now because YouTube be hating just a little bit on the music when you play it. And so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to give thanks and praise to the Creator for all things and everything, and may the Most High continue to open us our minds so that we may get understanding on the things that we are reading. And thanks once again for all who have joined us. And we're going to start out the next morning. The next morning, before I was awakened from my sleep by the sound of several heavy fires of cannon, which were discharged, as it seemed to me, within a few yards of the place where I lay, they were succeeded by fifes and drums, and all the noise which I had formerly heard the 4th of July ushered in at the Navy Yard in Washington. Since I had left Maryland, I had carefully kept the reckoning of the days of the week, but had not been careful to note the dates of the month. Yet as soon as daylight appeared and the door of our apartment was open, I inquired and learned that this was, as I supposed it to be, the day of universal rejoicing. I thought I turned this thing down. The day of universal rejoicing. Sorry. I understood that the court did not sit this day, but a great crowd of people gathered and remained around the jail all morning, many of whom were intoxicated and sang and shouted in honor of free government and the rights of men. About 11 o'clock, a long table was spread under a row of trees which grew in the street, not far from the jail, and which appeared to me to be the kind called in Pennsylvania the pride of China. At this table, several hundred persons sat down to dinner soon after noon and continued to eat and drink and sing songs in honor of liberty for more than 2 hours. At the end of the dinner, a gentleman rose and stood upon his chair near one end of the table and begged the company to hear him for a few minutes. He informed that he was a candidate for some office, but what office it was, I do not recollect, and said that as it was an acknowledged principle of our free government that all men were born free and equal, he presumed it would be sliga. He presumed it would not be deemed an act of arrogance in him to call upon them for their for their votes at the coming election. 1 second, please. Sorry about that. For those who have just joined us, this is the LEV Project, Lift Every Voice, and we are currently reading from 50 Years and Change, The Life of an American Slave, Charles Ball, Chapter 5. The first speaker was succeeded by another who addressed his audience in nearly the same language. And after he had concluded, the company broke up. I heard a black man that belonged to the jailer, or who was at least in his service, say that there had been a great meeting that morning in the courthouse, and at which several gentlemen had made speeches. When I lived at the Navy Yard, the officers sometimes permitted me to go uptown with them on the 4th of July and listen to the fine speeches that were made there on such occasions. About 5 o'clock, the jailer came and stood at the front door of the jail and proclaimed in a very loud voice that a sale of most valuable slaves would immediately take place, and that he had sold many fine hands yesterday, but they were only the refuse and most worthless part of the whole lot. That those who wished to get great bargains and prime property had better attend now, as it was certain that such Negroes have never been offered for sale in Columbia before. In a few minutes, the whole assembly that had composed the dinner party and hundreds of others were convened around the jail door, and the jailer again proceeded with his auction. Several of the stoutest men and handsomest women in the whole company had been reserved for this day, and I perceived that the very best of us were kept back for the last. We went off at rather better prices than had been obtained on the former day, and I perceived much eagerness amongst the bidders, many of whom were not sober. Within less than 3 hours, only 3 of us remained in the jail, and we were ordered to come and stand at the door in front of the crier, who made a most extravagant eulogium upon our good qualities and capacity to perform labor. He said, "These 3 fellows are as strong as horses and as patient as mules. One of them can do as much work as 2 common men, and they are perfectly honest. Mr. Griffin says he was assured by his former masters that they were never known to steal or run away. They must bring good prices, gentlemen, or they will not be sold. The master is determined that if they do not bring $600, he will not sell them, but will take them to Georgia next summer and sell them to some of the new settlers. These boys can do anything. This one," referring to me, "can cut 5 cords of wood in a day and put it up. He's a rough carpenter and a first-rate field hand. This one," laying his hand on the shoulder of one of my companions, "is a blacksmith and can lay a plowshare, put new steel upon an axe, or mend a broken chain. The other he recommended as a good shoemaker and well acquainted with the process of tanning leather. We were all nearly of the same age and very stout, healthy, robust young men in full possession of our corporal powers. And if we had been shut up in a room with 10 of the strongest of those who had assembled to purchase us, and our liberty had depended on tying them fast to each other, I have no doubt that would have been free if ropes had been provided us. After a few minutes of hesitancy amongst the purchasers and a closer examination of our persons than had been put in the jail yard, an elderly gentleman said he would take the carpenter and the blacksmith and the shoemaker. Were immediately taken by others at the required price. It was now sundown. The heat of the day had been very oppressive, and I was glad to be released from the confined air of the jail and the hot atmosphere in which so many hundred were breathing. My new master asked me my name and ordered me to follow him. He proceeded to a tavern where a great number of persons were assembled at a short distance from the jail. My master entered the house and joined in the conversation of the party, in which the utmost hilarity prevailed. They were drinking toasts in honor of liberty and independence over glasses of toddy, a liquor composed of mixing rum, water, sugar, and nutmeg. For those who have just joined us, we are reading 50 Years in Change, The Life of an American Slave by Charles Ball, Chapter 5. It was 10 o'clock at night before my master and his companions had finished their toast and toddy, and all this time I had been standing before the door or sitting on a log of wood that lay in front of the house. At one time, I took a seat on a bench at the side of the house, but was soon driven from this position by a gentleman in military clothes, with a large ephod on each shoulder and a profusion of glittering buttons on his coat, who, passing near me in the dark and happened to cast his eye on me, demanded of me in an imperious tone how I dared to sit on that seat. I told him I was a stranger and did not know what it was that it was wrong to sit there. He then ordered me with an oath to be gone from there, and said if he caught me on the bench again, he would cut my head off. Seriously? Sorry. Did you not see white people sit upon the bench, you saucy rascal? Said he. I assured him I had not seen any white gentlemen sit on the bench, as it was near night when I came to the house, that I had not intended to be saucy or misbehave myself, and that I hoped that he would not be angry with me, as my master had left me at the door and hadn't told me where I was to sit. I remained on the log until the termination of the festival in honor of liberty and equality. When my master came to the door, observed in my hearing to some of his friends, that they had celebrated the day in a handsome manner. No person except the military gentleman had spoken to me since I came to the house in the evening with my master, who seemed to have forgotten me, for he remained at the door warmly engaged in conversation on various political subjects, a full hour after he rose from the toast party. At length, however, I heard him say, I bought a Negro this evening. I wonder where he is. Rising immediately from the log on which I had been so long seated, I presented myself before him and said, Here, master. He then ordered me to go to the kitchen of the inn and go to sleep, but said nothing to me about supper. I retired to the kitchen, where I found a large number of servants who belonged to the house, and among them 2 young girls who had been purchased by a gentleman who lived near Augusta, and who they told me intended to set out for his plantation the next morning and take them with him. These girls had been sold out of our company on the first day, and had been living in the tavern kitchen since that time. They appeared quite content, and evinced no repugnance to setting out the next morning for their master's plantation. They were of that order of people who never look beyond the present day. And so long as they had plenty of victuals in his kitchen, they did not trouble themselves with reflections upon the cotton field. One of the servants gave me some cold meat and a piece of wheaten bread, which was the first I had tasted since I left Maryland. And indeed, it was the last I tasted until I reached Maryland again. Wow. I here met with a man who was born and brought up in northern neck of Virginia, on the banks of the Potomac, and within a few miles of my native place. We soon formed an acquaintance and sat up nearly all night. He was the chief hostler in the stable of this tavern, and told me that he had often thought of attempting to escape and return to Virginia. He said he had little doubt of being able to reach the Potomac, but having no knowledge of the country beyond that river, he was afraid that he should not be able to make his way to Philadelphia, which he regarded as the only place in which he could be safe from the pursuit of his master. I was myself then young, and my knowledge of the country north of Baltimore was very vague and undefined. I, however, told him that I heard that if a black man could reach any part of Pennsylvania, he would be beyond the reach of his pursuers. He said he could not justly complain of want of food, but the services required of him were so unreasonable that the punishment frequently inflicted upon him so severe that he was determined to set out for the north as soon as the corn was so far ripe as to be fit to be roasted. He felt confident by the lying of the wood in unfrequented places all day and traveling only by night. He could escape the vigilance of all pursuit and gain the northern neck before the corn could be gathered from the fields. He had no fear of wanting food, as he could live well on roasted ears as soon as the corn was in the milk, and afterward on parched corn, as long as the grain remained in the field. I advised him as well as I could as to the best means of searching the state of Pennsylvania, but was not able to give him any very defined instructions. For those who've just joined us, we are reading 50 Years in Chains. We are on chapter 5. If you would like to follow along, there is an online there is an online sorry there is an online book. So let's continue. Where are we? This man possessed a very strong understanding, and having been 5 years in Carolina, was well acquainted with the country. He gave me such an account of the sufferings of slaves on the cotton and indigo plantations, of whom I now regarded myself as one, that I was unable to sleep any this night, from the resolute manner in which he spoke of his intended elopement, and the regularity of which he had connected the various combinations of the enterprise. I had no doubt that he had undertook that which he intended to perform. Whether he was successful or not in the enterprise, I cannot say, as I never saw him or nor heard of him after the next morning. This man certainly communicated to me the outlines of the plan, which I afterwards put in execution, and by which I gained my liberty at the expense of sufferings which none can appreciate except those who have borne all the stoutest human constitution can bear, of cold and hunger, toil and pain. The conversation of this slave aroused in my breast, so many recollections of the past and fears of the future that I did not lie down, but sat on an old chair until daylight. From the people of the kitchen, I again received some cold victuals for my breakfast, but I did not see my master until 9 o'clock. The toddy of the last evening causing him to sleep late this morning. At length, a female slave gave me notice that my master wished to see me in the dining room, which I repaired without a moment's delay. When I entered the room, he was sitting near the window, smoking a pipe with a very long handle, I believe more than 2 feet in length. He asked no questions, but addressed me by the title of boy, ordered me to go with the hostler of the inn and get his horse and chaise ready. As soon as this order could be executed, I informed him that his chaise was at the door, and we immediately commenced our journey to the plantation of my master, which he told me lay at the distance of 20 miles from Columbia. He said I must keep up with him, and as he drove at the rate of 5 or 6 miles an hour, I was obliged to run nearly half the time. But I was then young and could easily travel 50 or 60 miles in a day. My goodness. It was with great anxiety that I looked for the place which was in future to be my home. But this did not prevent me from making such observations upon the state of the country through which we traveled as the rapidity of our march permitted. This man is on a horse and expecting you to run. Okay, sorry. For those who've just joined us, we're definitely going to have time to go over. I have one more page and then we'll be finished chapter 5. And we can definitely discuss so far what you received from the chapter. This whole region had originally been one vast wilderness of pine forests, except the low grounds and river bottoms here called swamps, in which all the varieties of trees, shrubs, vines, and plants particular to such a place. In southern latitudes, vegetated in unrestrained luxuriance. Nor is pine the only timber that grows on the uplands. In this part of California, although it is the predominant tree, and in some places prevails to the exclusion of every other, oak, hickory, sassafras, and many others are found. Here also I first observed groves of the most beautiful of all trees of the wood, the great southern magnolia or green bay. No adequate conception can be formed of the appearance of the fragrance of this most magnificent tree by anyone who has not seen it or scented the air when scented by the perfume of its flowers. It rises in a right line to the height of 70 or 80 feet. The stem is of a delicate taper form and cast off numerous branches, in nearly right angles with itself, the extremities of which decline gently towards the ground and become shorter and shorter in the ascent, until at the apex of the tree they are scarcely a foot in length, whilst below they are many times found 20 feet long. The immense cones formed by these trees are as perfect as those diminutive forms which nature exhibits in the bur of the pine tree. The length of the magnolia is smooth, of an oblong taper form, about 6 inches in length and half as broad. Its color is the deepest and purest green. The foliage of the bay green tree is as impervious as the brick wall to the rays of the sun, and its refreshing coolness in the heat of a summer day affords one the greatest luxuries of a cotton plantation. It blooms in May and bears great number of broad, expanding white flowers, the odor of which is exceedingly grateful and so abundant that I have no doubt that a grove of these trees in full blossom may smell at a distance of 15 or 20 miles. I have heard it asserted in the South that their scent has been perceived by persons 50 or 60 miles from them. Wow, magnolia, it smells like a tree I smelled recently. Sorry, I'm gonna take a little drink here of juice, that is. Sorry. This tree is one of of nature's most splendid, and in the climate where she has placed it, one of her most agreeable productions. It is peculiar to the southern temperate latitudes and cannot bear the rigors of northern winter. Though I have heard that groves of the bay are found in Fishing Creek in western Virginia, not far from Wheeling and near the Ohio River. Could this tree be naturalized in Pennsylvania? It would form an ornament to her towns, cities, and country seat. At once the most tasteful and most delicious. A forest of these trees in the month of May resembled a wood enveloped in an untimely fall of snow at midsummer, glowing in the rays of a morning sun. He's really descriptive. He make you forget he's in slavery. I'm sorry. He made me forgot for a moment. He's all up in the magnolia. We passed this day through cotton fields and pine woods alternatively, but the scene was sometimes enlivened by the appearance of lots of corn and sweet potatoes, which I observed were generally planted near the houses. I afterwards learned that this custom of planting the corn and potatoes near the house of the planter is generally all over Carolina. The object is to prevent the slaves from stealing and thus procuring more food than by law of the plantation they are entitled to. In passing through a lane, I this day saw a field which appeared to me to contain about 50 acres in which people were at work with hoes amongst a sort of plants that I had never seen before. I asked my master what this was, and he told me it was indigo. I shall have occasion to say more of this plant hereafter. We at length arrived at the residence of my master, who descended from his chaise, and leaving me in charge of the horse at the gate, proceeded to the house across a long court. In a few minutes, 2 young ladies and a young gentleman came out the house and walked to the gate near which I was with the horse. One of the ladies said they had come to look at me and see what kind of boy her pa had brought home with him. The other one said I was very smart looking boy, and this compliment flattered me greatly, they being the first kind words that had been addressed to me since I left Maryland. The young gentleman asked me if I could run fast and if I ever picked cotton. I can't. His manner did not impress me so much in his favor as the address of his sister had done for her. These 3 young persons were the son and daughters of my master. After looking at me a short time, my young master, for so I must call him now, or for so I must now call him, ordered me to take the harness from the horse, give him water at a well which was near, and come into the kitchen where some boiled rice was given me for my dinner. I was not required to go to work this first day of my abode in my new residence. But after I had eaten my rice, my young master told me I might rest myself or walk out and see the plantation, but that I must be ready to go to the overseer the next morning. That is the end of the reading of chapter 5 of uh, 50 Years in Change. So for those who have just joined us and you missed a little bit of it, you can go to replay. The first beginning part is on uh, part 3, and that was last Wednesday. And then I picked up on page 97 and on the online reading. So definitely for those who just joined us, if you would like to chime in at this time to say what you received from this particular portion, the mic is definitely open. Those who are on the conference line. I hear somebody. Not sure if they're hearing me. Let me check. So what I got from this portion, it was very interesting. Like I said, just in reading it, he's very descriptive. I think in that he's in his hardship, in the hostile environment that he's experiencing with people, he's not meshing it all together. And he's actually very, I don't know if he has a photographic memory or what, but he's taking the time to observe everything around him and recording it enough to be able to play it back. And in that, I think it brings back a level of humanity and mercy, just in your environment, the trees, the smell, these things that give small pleasures in such a harsh working environment and institutions such as the slavery that he's about to enter. So he's walking along, but he's still taking, like, this whole chapter made you almost forget what he was about to get into. Um, and I think it just is different for the minds. Our minds are different. Some people can just be concentrating on what's going to happen, the ills that are going to befall you. But for him particularly, it's like he's keeping a level head by looking beyond his current situation. And he said that some chapters back, for the hopes that things are going to get better, and they're not always going to be the way they are. So it's really, he's kind of like the glass is half full type of guy. That's what I've really gotten from him so far. Would anybody else like to comment at this time?
I'd like to say that he forwarded that information to what he wanted his future to be, like whether they can transplant that tree in Philadelphia or not.
Right.
It's also very hard to imagine what he went through the chapter before, which seems like it was just the day before, going through a beating and then having to run to his new master's plantation.
Yeah, I picked up on that too. Thank you for that, sister. That he's envisioning his future. Like you said, that he's wondering, this is a nice tree. I wonder what will it be able to survive the transplant? So he's not seeing himself forever in slavery. As we read, he spoke to the guy at the tavern, and it reminded him of, what, so we have to really, for me, it's like, be careful of how we interact with each other. We give positive words or negative words, and we don't know how hungry spiritually or emotionally people are, and how much they hang on to what you may have said to them. You may have just said it in passing, and for them it may be something that they're going to hang on to going forward, and it's kind of like their ray of hope. You may have just said, oh, there's a way to get there, and he's thinking for certainty, when you don't have anything else to refer to, that this is something concrete that he can go off of. So I definitely saw that as well, that he was thinking beyond his circumstance and situation to kind of keep the hope. Thank you for that, sis. Is there anything else that anyone like to say concerning this chapter? not sure if everybody's there. Another thing I thought was interest was how he seems the emotional type. Some would say the emotional type. He's responding to the kind word that he said that the new owner's daughter said to him, which is the first that he's heard since he left the whole ordeal started. And that also shows you how a word, even in this trying situation, even though these people are about to own him, he still thought that that word was something that would, compared to what the brother is saying, something that can bring some kind of relief. I thought that was interesting that he said that, because as I'm reading some of these slave narratives, in addition to this one, they kept saying or rationalizing that even though I'm in this situation, they were able to, okay, this is a good master, so to say, and this one is not good based on like what he's saying. So it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but beyond the ills of slavery, which in itself, the way in which it was perpetrated is nothing good. It's like kind of what they say, turning up the pot on the frog. How much can you tolerate? And so we began to rationalize in our minds, oh, you said something nice, and everything gets fuzzy in and around those areas. It's kind of like someone in a bad relationship, and the relationship is bad, but oh, you did something nice for me today. And so we hold on to that little bit of good that the individual did and overlook the fact that the very institution or the relationship that we're in is dysfunctional to a level. Would anyone else would like to share at this point? Well, I see we have a quiet listening crowd. They must be reflective. Last chapter was very filled with drama and wildness, and so this chapter was one that he came back with. He came back with a lot of descriptive terms, and so we're going to tomorrow, most high willing, we will go into chapter 6 at the same time, 8 o'clock, in chapter 6, and let's see what awaits him now at his new life on the plantation. I said one chapter at a time because some of these chapters are kind of deep and heavy, and they definitely require some meditation and just reflection. But that one was one that definitely I could rock with, because it kind of tapered off from the last reading. So I don't hear anyone with their hands up. If you want to put your hand up, you can put *5*. If you want to just listen, that's cool too. So until next time, feel free to invite a friend to the reading, and I'm a little bit tired today, so all praise be to the Most High. I woke up early this morning, did a whole lot of running. And so we finished with that. We'll pick up with 6 tomorrow. And I thank everybody for tuning in. And so until next time, be blessed. And definitely don't forget to take time to heal. All right. Shalom.